Kim Habayim, welcome. I'm Wayne Firestone. In behalf of all my colleagues at the American-Israel Friendship League, we've arrived at the end of December 2023, and we're so glad that you could join us today for this year-end webinar from the American-Israel Friendship League. We've had a year full of many highs and many lows, and obviously during this period of the war in Gaza, we have needed the ability to come together, both to express friendship as well as solidarity. And indeed, in November, that's something that we did, and we're going to share some highlights from a really incredible in-person event that we convened in New York. Before I do that, I want to get your input. We're always looking to build community. We're looking to build light. We're looking to build hope. We're looking to build friendship. And I'd love if anybody wants to share in the chat today just some thought, prayer, recognition, or honor of an inspiring person who over the course of this year has, even in the darkest of times, helped inspire you. We've done our best to shine the light on some really amazing people and some really amazing stories. And as many of you know, each year we do that at the end of the calendar year with our partners for Democracy Awards. And even though we had to modify that program this year, we went ahead and our colleagues from Israel and New York put together an incredible program whose focus was on an evening of friendship and solidarity. So we put together the very best clips from this evening, and we're going to share that with you. They include the ambassador, Israel's ambassador to the United States, Michael Herzog, our leadership, Jonathan Barsaid, as well as Eric Gertler will offer their greetings. And then this will be followed by really some very inspiring videos about our honorees for the Partners for Democracy Award. We'll have some great voices of joy singing the national anthems. And the real highlight for the evening, a fireside chat that includes New York Times journalist Thomas Friedman and Israel Democracy Institute President Yohanan Plesner, moderated by our own chairman of the Israel board of AIFL, Ambassador Dan Gillerman. I know that's quite a program. We'll be a little bit longer than we normally are over the hour, but trust me, it's really worth staying through the whole episode. It'll really give you something to reflect on and hopefully enter the new year with some hope. So sit back, enjoy the program that we have for you, and look forward to kicking it off at this time.
Welcome to the America-Israel Friendship League's Evening of Friendship and Solidarity. This evening we will begin by inviting you to join us in the singing of the national anthems of the United States and Israel. Leading us once again this year are two Israeli artists, Hadar Urishalimi on vocals and Shai Kedmi accompanying her on the piano. Would everyone please rise?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting תקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים. תודה רבה.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President of the America-Israel Friendship League, Jonathan Barsaid.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to open my statement this year actually with a prayer that is saying what is in all of our hearts, a prayer for hope and healing. Please grant us, the people in Israel, the strength to see through these times of turmoil and conflict. Please grant our leaders the wisdom to navigate the complexity of these times. Please strengthen the bonds of unity among the people of Israel, but also of the Jewish people around the world, wherever they may be. Because the bottom line is that in unity and solidarity, we will overcome any adversity. We pray for the readjustment of those hostages that have been returning these last few days. We pray for the safety of the soldiers defending Israel. And most important, we pray ever so strongly for the swift return of each and every one of those who were so ghastly taken 52 days ago from the homes, from the fields of an open-air concert, from their loved ones, and who have not yet come back. May hope and better times reign over us all. I ask that you all stand for a moment of silence in loving memory of those slaughtered and killed that fateful day, October 7th, 2023, Kaf Bet Tishrei, Tafshin Pei Daled. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd like to start by thanking and welcoming our guests of honor and each and every one of you who's come, and the guests of honor who each and every one of them is a recognized leader in their respective fields. Each and every one of them has overcome obstacles with creativity, ingenuity, and perseverance, and they have all become a beacon of positivity and can-do. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. Although not with us here this evening, Bernie Marcus, co-founder of Home Depot, Yohanan Plesner of the Israel Democracy Institution, Boaz Levy, president and CEO of the Israel Aerospace industry, and Tom Friedman, columnist and reporter of the New York Times. And of course, thank you to Ambassador Mike Herzog, who will be with us, joining us shortly via live Zoom, and to the members of the Israeli delegation here in New York City, together with Acting Consul General of Israel, Aviv Ezra. Also with us today are honored representatives from the Boeing Corporation, Dr. Brendan Nelson, President of Boeing Global, and Ido Shamil, former head of Israel Air Force, of the Israeli Air Force, and current president of the Boeing Israel. You may ask also, by the way, we have over here in the middle, there's an empty table, and that table is representing the hostages that are not with us, that are still over there in Gaza. Hopefully, we'll be able to fill this and many other tables like that very shortly. But also together with us today are truly honored guests, members and representatives of the families who were impacted by those tragic events of October 7th. The Lotan family, grandmother and two sisters of Adil Mesika, who was killed at the Nova Music Festival. Wonen and Orna Natura, the parents of Omer, a soldier who was kidnapped and still held hostage in Gaza. And Nitan Mintz and Didi Banstead, artists who initiated the Kidnapped from Israel poster campaign that you have probably seen not only around the city, but all over the world. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for joining us today. And finally, I must thank our wonderful team, who through adversity, they continue to rise and shine and deliver on the impossible. They are dedicated to this organization and to the cause, and without them, we would not be here, neither this evening or as an organization. Ruby, who tries to leave her role as executive director and keeps on coming back to continue her role as lay leader. Our new executive director in Israel, Daniela Rilov. Who has shown time and time again that she's definitely up to the task of stepping into those large shoes that Ruby's left behind. Giovanni, who is behind the table over there, but you probably can't see her. Giovanni, who has been through so much with me, yet keeps on coming back for more punishment. Raquel, who with her own quiet demeanor, there's no task too large or too small for her. And Bianca, who is up there for any task with a smile and charm. And of course, there's Kim over there, who, with her team, have been behind these events for so many years. And of course, my partners in crime, Eric Gertler and Danny Gillerman, who I truly thank you for your trust and support and backing me with any mishigas I come up with. I don't take it for granted. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I find it hard this year to give you an uplifting greeting. These last 52 days, I think it is, an important topic of conversation has been about the assumption of responsibility for those tragic events of October 7th. There's a deep conversation about the responsibility of the political leadership, the armory leadership, the intelligence community, and I can go on and on. But the bottom line is that I have not heard yet any discussion about the responsibility of ourselves, the people in Israel and the people of the Jewish community around the world. I'm not talking about the events of October 7th itself, but rather to the aftermath, the dehumanization of Israelis in the international community. For if any significant part of the international community is willing to accept the events of October 7th as an acceptable consequence of how Palestinians are treated, regardless of one's political stance, we have failed. If anyone is willing to accept that Israelis do not have a basic right to go to sleep without fear of waking up to exploding missiles, to being slaughtered, torched, burned, beheaded, raped, we have failed. If anyone can justify any of these actions, then we have moved out of the realm of viewing Israelis as human beings, and we have enabled the dehumanization of Israelis. If the Secretary General of the United Nations is incapable of condemning these actions, the dehumanization of Israelis has climbed the political ladder. If international organizations that their sole mission is that of combating violence against women remain silent, and despite overwhelming objective evidence, deny that Israelis women were raped, we have entered into a realm where Israeli women are not human and are not entitled to the basic protection we work so hard to afford women wherever they may be. Unlike in previous conflicts where the focus has been on Israel and what Israel is doing, we are witnessing now how the focus is on isolation has shifted and is applied to anything Jewish and Israeli around the world. The moment that children are afraid to walk on campuses in the United States or mention the word Israel, when Jews are attacked in parking lots, when storefront windows are shattered, vandalized, we are transgressing out of the realm of free speech and political opinions and enter into a realm of terror that its sole purpose is to instill a fear of being associated with the Jewish community or with Israel. And this act of stigmatization and isolation is but one step of the dehumanization of Israel and its Israelis. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, we are responsible. We the people, members of the international community, we the America-Israel Friendship League. It might sound presumptuous. How do I have the audacity to claim that such a small organization like the America-Israel Friendship League could change world opinion? But if this organization and the many different organizations that belong to this community, and we the people, members of this community, were doing our job, maybe we could have some kind of impact. You see, for the last 75 years or so, we have all focused on making Israel invincible, portraying Israelis as super people. 1948, the War of Independence. 1967, the Six-Day War. Turning a surprise attack into an overwhelming victory in less than 3 weeks during the 1973 war. Startup nation, on and on. It was important to create this perception because we had to create deterrence. And if we're honest with ourselves, it made us also feel good. Who doesn't want to be a winner? And I say this as an Israeli and as an American. What we fail to address is how do we balance between this sense of invincibility necessary for deterrence while still maintaining the perception that we are human beings and that there are certain rules of basic behavior that should never be crossed and can never be justified. And for that, I apologize. I apologize because I feel that we have failed. 52 years ago, the America-Israel Friendship League was entrusted with a sacred mission: make friends for Israel. And never before has this mission been so salient. Never before has the purpose of this mission been made so clear. Last 5 years, this organization has developed 3 pillars of activity that are designed to pursue this mission. Our delegations, bringing high-impact people to Israel. Our webinars, introducing Israel and Israelis to the community at large. And our AIFL Connect, our small communities designed to engage people on a social networking capacity. These are pillars that are designed to not only bring Americans to Israel, but to bring Israel to 300 million Americans. And these pillars are designed specifically to humanize Israelis. I still believe that this rebranding and focus are essential, and that once scaled, these pillars of activity can help bridge this gap I'm referring to. That the community at large will come to realize that Israelis are human and are entitled to not be subject to acts of sheer brutality, that their sole intent is to sow fear and terror. Israelis are human and should be entitled to these rights regardless of one's political stance. One might disagree with government policies. That does not justify the dehumanization of the people. At the American Israel Friendship League, we will remain dedicated to this mission. As a nonpartisan, non-affiliated organization, our task is to humanize Israelis across the spectrum, Jews and Christians, Muslims and Hindu, Americans and Europeans. We'll continue to work to build a community of friends of Israel, people who care about Israel as friends care about each other, people who view Israelis as human beings. We don't expect this community to be blindly loyal to government policies. We don't expect this community to always agree with each other. But we do expect this community of people to care about Israel and about Israelis, and who will do what they can to make sure that Israelis are treated with dignity, humanity, empathy, just like any other member of the international community. Thank you, and good evening. I'd like to draw your attention now to the video screens above the stage to get a glimpse of what we have been doing as an organization.
A profound bond, meaningful collaboration, mutual enrichment, and shared values connect Americans and Israelis together throughout the years.
The focus of the AIFL is to increase the understanding of Israel, what Israel is, who Israelis are, what Israelis are all about. By understanding this, by learning about the commonalities that there are between our two people, by learning about all the wonderful things that emanate from Israel, that is really how we create long-term friendships.
The American-Israel Friendship League strengthens the bonds between Israelis and Americans and brings to life the amazing parts of both countries: tech innovation, cultural happenings, and even political and historical events.
Each year, the America-Israel Friendship League sends a good number of leadership delegations to Israel, introducing American leaders and opinion makers from various fields to Israel's significant achievements in areas such as innovation, technology, economy, science, and culture.
The ingenuity, the positive spirit that this nation, which is no bigger than New Jersey, brings to a dangerous part of the world is inspiring.
His trips like this show you the importance that Israel plays as an ally to the U.S. in the Middle East.
You can see things on TV, you can read them, but to truly walk your talk is something that is life-changing, and to make those connections with people that have the same love and aspirations as we do really brings it home that we are all in this together.
As Americans, we cannot yield and put Israel ever in the back burner. If not, our enemies will be not only amongst Israel, but amongst us even quicker. So we have to show our strength and support the state so that we can ensure that Israel remains democratic and a free state.
During the horrifying events of the Iron Swords War, the AIFL, together with many American organizations, supported the amazing efforts of Israel's civil society, which stood strong, fostering strength and resilience with numerous spontaneous initiatives that sprung across the country, leveraging also upon its existing activities to increase awareness of AIFL's large stakeholder community about what is happening in Israel. The AIFL has taken bold steps in building bridges with over 3.1 million webinar viewers, over 16 million people who followed our messaging, all the members of the local communities, our delegation participants. All of these combine to enhance and fortify the mutual friendship and relationship between the people of our two nations. Always aspiring to foster future connections, the AIFL constantly creates new initiatives, such as AIFL Connects, building and connecting communities of people who care about Israel, and creating the foundation for expansion of AIFL family.
The America-Israel Friendship League, with its mission of bringing the two people together and ensuring the strong alliance and friendship between the two countries, is more essential than ever.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's with great honor for me to present via live Zoom streaming the representative of the State of Israel, Ambassador Michael Herzog.
Good evening, my friends. I want to thank AIFL for inviting me, especially my good friends Eric Gertler and Danny Gillerman. I'm sorry that I'm not with you physically, but I'm certainly with you in spirit. And I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the recipients of the awards, all deserving. The current war is one of the toughest challenges that the State of Israel has faced since its inception in 1948, perhaps the toughest challenge. And this is because of the nature of the enemy, an extreme organization dedicated to the destruction of the State of Israel, an organization that is a member, a proxy of Iran, a member of the Iranian-led Axis, which is also focused on destroying the State of Israel, and the nature of their behavior on October 7th, the breaching of the border and the atrocities and the kidnapping of people, which is a national trauma for the State of Israel. And against this background, there is a broad consensus in the State of Israel that Israel can no longer live with that threat in our neighborhood, in our immediate neighborhood, that we have to remove that threat. And there is a broad consensus that we have to go in, dismantle the Hamas military infrastructure, and remove the leadership that built and operated this threat. Because if we don't, they will emerge from the tunnels, they will declare victory, they will continue to govern Gaza, they will rebuild their capability, and they will strike again and again. How do we know? First, they are saying it. Second, they have done it. They have done it in 2008, in 2012, in 2014, and in 2029, 21, and in 2023. And each and every time we met a stronger Hamas, now a full proxy of Iran. So we have to remove that threat, and there is consensus in Israel. People are united around the goal of no more and never again, and we are going to remove that threat. While doing so, a key priority for us is to return all the hostages safe and sound to their homes. I know there are families in the crowd, and we are very delighted that we've seen release of hostages in the last few days. We are giving an opportunity to the release of as many hostages as possible, and we are willing to give more days of pause for as long as Hamas produces more hostages. We strongly believe, this is a professional belief in Israel, which I also share, that our ground operation in Gaza enabled the current deal. We're not sure, we're doubtful that we could have had such a deal without putting pressure on Hamas on the ground, and we will continue to pressure Hamas in order to secure the release of all the hostages. Unfortunately, this war, the assault on the Jewish people, unleashed the demons of anti-Semitism, assaulting not only the Jewish state, but the Jewish people as a whole. And we have seen 2 weeks ago a huge rally of support for the State of Israel, calling for the release of hostages, but also calling out against anti-Semitism. We had 300,000 people on the ground here in DC, plus 200,000 people joining online. And this was a heartening show of solidarity. And together we are stronger. Together we have a voice. We all know that since the beginning of this war, the US administration and Congress have shown a strong, steadfast support for the State of Israel, which has expressed itself in many ways: political support, material assistance, putting forward an unprecedented supplemental to enhance the security of the State of Israel, sending deterrent messages to Iran, Hezbollah, and other Iranian proxies. This is really heartening, and it tells you something about the basis of our relations. I want to take this opportunity to thank the administration and Congress on both sides of the aisle for their support. We do not take it for granted, and we will not forget US support, American support to Israel in our dark hour. As we are talking about not only a physical war on the ground, but there is a deeper sense here of a clash of civilizations between those who uphold the values of humanity and those who desecrated it. Israel and the US are destined to stand together and fight together, because we are on the right side of history in terms of values of humanity. I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for everything that you are doing, to thank you for your support for the Israel-US relations, which are essential. And we pray and hope that together, and given our spirit, we can prevail and we will prevail. Thank you very much.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the chairman of the America-Israel Friendship League, Mr. Eric Gertler.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. Like all of you in this room, I have found the last 7 weeks to be heartbreaking on so many levels. It was gut-wrenching as we learned of the savagery and the brutality committed against innocent Israelis on October 7th. Yet we have seen some light in the darkness as kidnapped children and other hostages have been returned to their families in Israel in recent days. And we continue to pray for all those that are still held as hostages, and may the memories of those that have been perished, may they be a blessing. Of course, in the weeks since, we have faced the reality that both our beloved Israel and the Jewish people in the United States are under attack. Israel must again defend herself against a terrorist organization bent on destroying her, and American Jews are combating deep anti-Semitism in our cities and college campuses. The bonds that the American-Israel Friendship League helped to cement between Israel and the United States have never been more important. Where would Israel be today without a United States supporting Israel's right to exist and her right to defend itself? Where would American Jews find the strength to face growing anti-Semitism without knowing that all Jews have a home in the ancestral land of Israel? All of this to say, never before has the mission of the American Friendship League been so important. As an organization, we are committed above all to ensuring that the relationship between the United States and Israel remains unbreakable. We are committed to supporting the many ways that Israel and the United States are tightly connected, and this can never be taken for granted. It is easy to be a friend during the good times. A true friend comes to you in the difficult times and protects you and supports you when you need it most. That is what the United States must do during this conflict. That is why the United States must be aligned with Israel, our great ally in the Middle East, the only democracy in the region, and the country that most shares our values. It goes without saying that we as an organization would not be able to do what we do without all of your continued support. We are deeply grateful for that support. Let me also congratulate our honorees, Bernie Marcus, Boaz Levy, and Yohanan Plesner. Thank you for giving us the privilege of honoring you tonight. And this organization is indebted to the efforts of Jonathan Barsaid, Ruby Shamir, Dan Gillerman, Daniela Rieloff, and the rest of the team that Jonathan so aptly pointed out by name. Thank you all.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the chairman of the board of AIFL Israel, Ambassador Dan Gillerman.
Good evening, friends. After the very moving words of Marielle and of Omer's parents, it's very difficult to speak, so I will be very short. I arrived from Israel yesterday, especially for this evening, and I can tell you that it's not easy to leave Israel at this moment. One would think that with all the horrors going on, a little respite in New York would do you good. But this is the time to be in Israel, to share with everybody both the horror and the hope that we undergo and that we witness every day. And I just want to tell you and share with you the fact that with all the horrible, horrible events that have taken place in Israel, and especially the massacre, the brutal massacre on October 7th, also wonderful things are happening in Israel. At this hour of need and despair and great danger, the Israeli people have come together like never before. They have united like never before. And in fact, what you see each and every day is a manifestation of the friendship, love, respect, and resilience of the Israeli people. People who have demonstrated in the streets to preserve Israel's democracy have within hours built practically an alternative government and are doing everything possible to make sure that we win this battle. And we will win it. But you know what mystifies me every time again is the misunderstanding, and that's a very weak word for the double standards and hypocrisy that we witness around the world. The anti-Semitism, the anti-Israelism is to me something which I cannot fathom. Don't these people and doesn't the world understand that the fight we are fighting is actually also for them? Because what we're witnessing in Israel today is really only the preview, soon to be seen in a theater near you. If we don't stop these horrible terrorists, they will come here, they will come to Europe, and they will create a horrible, horrible world for all of us. You know, when I was sent to the United Nations, I was told by many friends that I'm going to a place where I will be lonely and persecuted and hated. And I can tell you that each and every day when I walked the halls of the United Nations, I walked with my head held up high because I knew that I was representing a country that was far better than most other members of the United Nations. I still believe that, although today, especially after the words of the Secretary General, I feel slightly ashamed to have been part of that organization. But I want to assure you of one thing, and maybe I will demonstrate it with a short story. Many people wonder, how will this end? How will we finish the job? And I'm reminded of a story about this teacher who asked a class of 8-year-olds to draw a picture of something tangible, something they know. And one little boy drew a cat, and another one drew a dog, and another one drew a house. And there was this blonde, blue-eyed little girl who was doodling and drawing something completely incomprehensible. And the teacher came to her and said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "But how could you? I asked everybody to draw a picture of something they know, something tangible. Nobody knows what God looks like." And that blue-eyed little girl looked up at the teacher and said, "Don't worry, when I finish, they will. When we finish, the world will understand why we fought, why we sacrificed so much, and how we won."
Bernard Bernie Marcus was raised in a lower-class home in Newark, New Jersey. As a young boy, he became a member of a local gang.
Most of my friends were black. I was the leader of a gang. It was a tough neighborhood. It was really tough. And we were poor, but we didn't know it. I mean, I didn't have a clue. My mother was the great matriarch. My mother was the Kissinger of her age. She was bright as hell.
Bernie's mother taught the children the importance of tzedakah, and this important Jewish value of giving to support the poor has remained with Bernie his entire life. After his pharmacy studies, Bernie went out to work in drugstores.
But I wasn't interested in pharmacy. It wasn't exciting enough for me. I was more interested in the retail aspect of it.
He moved on to run home improvement stores, but got fired from the job.
Getting fired, which was a traumatic, terrible blow to me at that time, turned out to be the greatest thing that could have happened to me. and went on to establish the Home Depot, and of course the rest is history.
Today, Home Depot is a global company and the largest home improvement retailer in the US with 500,000 associates around the world, including Israel.
Bernie always had a great love to the state of Israel. He was a great believer in the Israeli entrepreneurship and innovation. It was Bernie and Home Depot who opened the door for us. I exported over $1 billion to Home Depot at that time, and some of the Israeli companies became international leaders in their category due to the fact that we were able to innovate and create brand new products.
For the past 30 years, Bernie and his wife Billy have been focusing their energy and resources on philanthropy in a wide range of areas, such as medicine and medical research, free enterprise and support of veterans, children, and youth development, and Israel and Jewish causes. Among their many contributions to Israel, they co-founded the Israel Democracy Institute, helped save lives with Magen David Adom, supported Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh, and connected Startup Nation to the global business community. Bernie Marcus made a wide and lasting impact on his community and well beyond. In the ever-evolving landscape of defense technology, Israel Aerospace Industries stands as a global leader, offering a vast portfolio in both the defense and commercial markets, developing, producing, and delivering state-of-the-art technologies and systems across a range of domains. Since IAI's establishment, the company has worked closely with numerous American companies on countless projects, delivering cutting-edge solutions in air, land, sea, space, cyber, homeland security, and ISR domains. As a truly global company, IAI operates in varied markets around the world, from Europe to North America, through Colombia and Brazil in the south, and from Australia, India, and South Korea in the east. IAI pushes the boundaries of aerospace and defense by leveraging its extraordinary human capital, exceptional technological capabilities, and bold business mindset. These days, during the Iron Swords War, IAI plays a crucial role in reinforcing the capabilities of the Israel Defense Forces with its state-of-the-art technologies. The company's unwavering commitment to the IDF and all of the security forces was exemplified as it provided advanced defense solutions that proved instrumental in safeguarding Israel.
Egypt? No. Soviet Union? Yes. United Kingdom?
Call it a miracle.
Spain?
Call it divine intervention. Or call it a triumph of the human spirit. No matter what you choose to call it, the establishment of a Jewish democracy in the heart of the Middle East was one of the most improbable events in human history.
October 1947. Demonstrating and rioting Arabs returning to the Strip forced the UN guards to take...
But how can we ensure that this miracle endures far into the future? For us at the Israel Democracy Institute, it is not just our daily job. It's our mission. We see ourselves as the guardians at the gate, dedicated to defending and strengthening the most challenged and fascinating democracy in the world.
George Shultz, the former Secretary of the State, who was a great friend of IDI, defined IDI not as a think tank, but as a do tank.
We are not deterred by all the divisions, the internal tensions, and the contradictions.
We're in the 75th year of our independence, and this is probably the most challenging year since Israel was established. Hamas recently attacked southern Israel with a clear intent of annihilating the Jewish state. Before that, we dealt with the deepest internal division, and the 5 years before that, the most intense political crisis with consecutive election campaigns.
We seek to turn diversity into a source of strength so that Israel can continue to thrive and prosper for centuries to come. How do we do that? First, we conduct applied research to study best practices from around the world. to offer busy decision makers practical proposals for improving Israeli democracy. But the real work begins where the research ends. IDI experts are not only scholars, they are policy entrepreneurs who work hand in hand with decision makers from across the political spectrum to devise and implement policies that make Israel a better place.
In all of those moments of truth, IDI was there with solutions, with data, with experts, with expertise to try and overcome those difficult moments, provide solutions, and help pave the direction towards a better future.
No one appointed us to this role, but we have an obligation to act.
Going forward, in the immediate aftermath of the war, there will be a lot of fixing to do. We will have to bring Israeli society together to agree on a common constitutional system, an electoral system, economic fixing the systems of government, to build a vision of a strong Israel. So 25 years from now, as we celebrate our 100th birthday, we will look at this period as a trajectory-changing moment where we actually build and solidify our future as a secure, prosperous Jewish and democratic state.
So, call it a miracle if you will. We call it our mission.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Gillerman, Thomas Friedman, and Yohanan Plesner.
Good evening, friends. Is this working?
Yeah.
Good. As this is practically the finale of this very special evening, I just want to pay tribute, first and foremost, really, to the memory of the fallen, and pray for the safe return of the hostages, and wish their families, some of whom are here, good news very, 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 very soon. We all pray for you. We all share your feeling. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues, Eric Gertler, Jonathan Barsede, Ruby Shamir, Daniela Rilov, and the teams that made this evening possible. Now, I guess, and I think I'm right, that you're not sitting there right now waiting to hear me. I have with me two people who I admire and who I am sure will enrich this evening with their wisdom. On my left, to me, and I think to most of us, a legend, Tom Friedman. You know, I was thinking very hard how to describe Tom, and it's practically endless. He's an author. I still think that his first book, From Beirut to Jerusalem, is the most definitive, wise, and enriching description of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to this very day. And he's written many books after that. He's probably the world's most respected journalist and columnist. And anybody who read the New York Times yesterday saw that beyond his usual 800 or 1,000 words, he devoted about 4,000 words to the war between Israel and Hamas. And in fact, I asked him before whether the number of articles that he's written about this conflict are really the most he's ever written about any subject. And I think Tom said that it was. And on my right, a very close friend and someone I respect and admire, Yohanan Plesner, but you've heard all about him and seen the movie. But that movie, by the way, is no fiction. It's a documentary of an incredible life and wonderful achievements. And we as Israelis owe Yohanan a great debt of gratitude for everything he's done, both as an officer in Israel's elite fighting unit and now as a president of Israel's foremost think tank and institute that provides so much wisdom, experience, and information to make our country better. So here we are, and I will maybe, I think what we want to discuss, Tom and Yocha, is what happened, how did it happen, why did it happen, or maybe even before that, where are we now at this very moment in time, and also what is the end game, and how do we envisage the day after. So, Tom, I'll start with you with the question that everybody asks and which has been raised even this evening. How did this happen?
Well, first of all, Danny, thank you for having me here. As people don't know, you invited me here 9 months ago to actually talk about the democracy reform, and obviously a few things changed in between. I'm doubly glad to be here, though, and I'm humbled to be in the room with the hostage families and relatives. I like to start, Danny, at 30,000 feet. I think we're in a moment in history where two giant things were happening of a sort of 1989 quality, but weren't apparent. And the way I describe it in shorthand is that Ukraine was trying to join the West, and Israel was trying to join the East. And Russia stopped Ukraine from joining the West, and Russia and Iran and Hamas are trying to prevent Israel from joining the East. I'm talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia that would have opened the way to really unprecedented depth of Israeli integration, into the East. So 30,000 feet, I think that's what's going on. And Iran and Russia are now closer than ever. I was in Ukraine before the war in Israel started and was very aware of what was going on, that how much Ukraine was trying to join the West, and what a earth-shaking development that would have been, because it would actually have been the biggest expansion of a Europe whole and free since East Germany joined West Germany in 1989. East Germany joining West Germany. Who was the KGB chief in East Germany in 1989? It was Vladimir Putin. So he understood the implication of Ukraine joining the West. Ukraine, which now has the biggest land army in Europe, which has the most, it turns out, more engineers than Germany and France every year, and is the world's breadbasket. If Ukraine becomes a member of the EU and NATO, the whole European project of a Europe whole and free takes on a whole new meaning, and that was a fundamental threat to Putin. Ditto, the idea of Israel normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia as part of a deal that would have created a US-Saudi also security pact. That would have fundamentally isolated two forces, Iran, obviously, and also Hamas, because part of that Saudi-Israel-American deal would have involved the Palestinian Authority and some kind of energized effort toward a two-state solution. And so if you ask me, Yohanan will be better on what happened micro, but macro, I think that's what's going on. And I would just say the thing that worries me most, when I was in Israel a few weeks ago, I went to the Dead Sea to meet the surviving families of kibbutz Be'eri. And like that in itself was just such a disorienting experience. An entire kibbutz, surviving kibbutz, 700 people living in the Daniel Hotel on the Dead Sea because the border is not secure, obviously. The same thing is going on, obviously, in Kiryat Shmona as a result of Hezbollah's pressure from the north. And so I believe what's going on now is Iran, Hezbollah. So we have two aircraft carriers right now. We have one in the carrier groups. We have one in the Eastern Mediterranean the Ford, and then we have the Eisenhower actually off the coast of Iran, now in the Persian Gulf. So we have two carrier groups in the Middle East. Iran had two aircraft carrier groups. Iran has 4 landcraft carrier groups. They're called Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Shiite militias in Iraq. And they are power projection platforms exactly like our aircraft carriers. And I believe what Iran is trying to do, all it needs to do is fire 1 missile a day now at Israel's northern border, 1 at its eastern border, and you keep 200 to 250,000 Israelis in limbo, not in their homes. And I think ultimately Iran's objective is to shrink Israel and to create a situation where, you know, the most talented, the most important, the most world-class Israelis who really are the tip of Israel's spear will want to leave the country. So I think that's the strategy. I don't think we have a counter strategy yet for that, but that's something I'm actually writing about this week. I think it's going to be something we need to think very deeply about, both as America, both for Israel, but also as a Western alliance.
Yocha, you just got the micro slot.
Well, it's an honor to try and complement Tom's analysis. Well, you know, we can look at it. There's the foreign policy level from the Israeli perspective. There's the intelligence failure. There's the operational failure, and there's the doctrine failure. And at all levels, we failed. At the level of the doctrine, you know, there was quite a bit of a conversation. You know, what happened? You know, Netanyahu wanting to strengthen Hamas at the expense of the Palestinian Authority, to kill the idea of 2 states, and it actually worked. It did. It killed whenever he wanted to go on any kind of a negotiation. He's saying, are you talking to the Palestinian Authority? Who are they representing? They're not representing. Who are they? The entire Palestinian people. So to some extent, the idea of driving a wedge between the 2 parts of the Palestinian people actually worked. And the idea was, basically it was called the Hamas containment doctrine. We can contain Hamas. The power moderates, and if we give them enough carrots, and every now and then some deterrence and exact a price if they lift up their heads, it will somehow work. And we had those cycles of violence, and every now and then the idea was we're exacting a price. They get the point, and we can somehow live with that. Now, it was a Netanyahu doctrine because of what I just mentioned, but if to be fair, it was also our security establishment that sort of led this line of it's very costly to remove Hamas in terms of international legitimacy, Israeli lives, the time it will require, unclear what are you going to do with the day after? So all the problems that we're dealing with today, the defense analysts presented to the cabinet and said, well, why don't we just try to hit them hard, buy more time, and something might change. So it was a combination of generally a Netanyahu strategy that had to do with what I mentioned and the defense establishment. And this is where we ended up. Now, and obviously in terms of Hamas, sometimes power moderates extremists, radicals. There are examples in history, and sometimes it does not. And there are examples for that as well. You know, I mean, the Nazis and so on, power didn't moderate them. So this is the case with Hamas. Power didn't moderate them, and what appears in their charter in 1988 is the same strategy that they're trying to execute with Iranian support and as part of a broader vision. By the way, Tom, there's a 5th land carrier, which is what the Iranians are building in Syria. And it's still not operational, but they're working on it, and it's part of that strategy. In terms of the intelligence failure, well, that will have to be studied, and we're having every day now sort of some new information is coming out on how we could actually build a better picture and understand, but we were sort of to some extent the captives of the doctrine that Hamas can be deterred. And finally, the operational failure, the idea that actually we have great technologies and so on, and we will have an intelligence alert, and therefore you don't need too many forces around there. So those failures were piled on top of each other, and then there's the fourth one, which is to some extent connected with the reason for this evening. Originally, when this evening was initiated, the theme was the great struggle and division within Israeli society about the nature of our democracy, and the idea that you can rip Israeli society apart and drive Israelis against one another without our enemies noticing it and identifying it as a source of weakness and trying to use this moment of opportunity is a very bad idea.
Right. Well, let's dwell for a moment on where we are literally today. I think we are at a very unprecedented moment and probably decisive moment. We've just concluded what was agreed upon as 4 days of humanitarian pause. And in return, we have welcomed back over 60 hostages. Now, and you know, the news moves so fast, so maybe I'm not even up to date because I haven't looked at my smartphone for about 2 hours, so we don't know what happened, but things happened very quickly. But we know that Hamas is asking for 2 more days, and in return, Israel will receive at least 20 more hostages. Where do you see this going? I mean, do you see Hamas, who is a very cruel and vicious enemy, continuing to play with the emotions of the Israeli public, using the hostages, finding additional ones every few days in order to win more time? Do you see Israel capable of actually renewing the attack and finishing the job? Where do you see us going from here, Tom?
So big questions, Danny. I would say a couple things. One, a point I made in one of my very first columns after the war began is that you can write the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict long, or you can write it short, okay? And I tried to write the long version in Beirut to Jerusalem. Now I'll give you the short version. War, timeout, war, timeout, war, timeout, war, timeout, war, timeout, war, timeout. Starting in 1900 or wherever you want to start, 1929. And the difference between the two parties is what each one did during the timeout. Hamas dug tunnels, Israel built an amazing economy and society. And I think this is going to be the real challenge and struggle for Israel. Because I don't know how long this war will take. Hamas has been preparing this for a long time. One of the things I learned most on my trip recently, I had an evening with Aviv Kochavi, the former chief of staff, and he said something to me which was obvious now to me, but didn't really hit me. He said, you know, we tend to talk about the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah as militias, you know, as it were, terrorist militias. But these are now armies. These are armies with divisions, brigades, and their own, Boaz, they have their own defense industries. It's incredible. If you look at Hamas, they didn't come over with junk. They came over with new weapons, you know. So I think the real struggle and for Israel is going to be how far do you go? How long does it take? And because Hamas lives to create martyrs. They're very, very open about that. Israel lives to create a society where its people, both Jews and Arabs, as I wrote about last weekend, can realize their full potential. Those are two very different projects. But when you're up against that kind of enemy, you're going to have to make some really difficult choices about how far and how long this goes. I mean, it's great to say we will fight until we root them out. God, I hope that happens, and I hope it's tomorrow. But it's not going to be easy. I think we need to understand that. And there will be a trade-off on the other side in terms of Israel's economy and development, et cetera. Now, some would say you have no choice, and that may be the case. I'm not suggesting it's some easy, obvious thing. But that we always have to remember Israel does amazing stuff during the timeouts, you know, and Hamas dug tunnels. And so that's something I think is very top of mind for me. And I do think, though, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up with false hopes, but I do believe that Hamas understands now that, not out of mercy or compassion, but Gaza City's been destroyed, a lot of it. It needs to show a success here. And the only success that it can really show now is an all-for-all trade, where it gets 6,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails for the remaining prisoners it's holding. God, I hope it's 200, but however many. It needs to show something. And so I do think we're starting to see that calculation kicking in now in its behavior. Could all change tomorrow, but one thing I learned living in Beirut for 5 years is that I coined a phrase that all politics in the Middle East, all important politics, happens the morning after, what I call Bad Bukra. So the morning after, in 2006, after Israel really pummeled Beirut in the 2006 war with Hezbollah, the morning after, Nasrallah came out and said, you know, revolution until victory, Thawra Hatta Nasr, we held off the Yehudis for 34 days, look at me. The morning after, the conversation you didn't see was some guy in the southern suburbs saying to Nasrallah, Ya Ammi Ta'al, okay, that's my house there on the ground. What are you going to do about it? And that's what produced a famous interview that Nasrallah gave 2 weeks later, in which he said, if I'd known when I started this war what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. And so these calculations, I believe, are also going on with Hamas. How they'll net out, I don't know, but I know Hamas right now, they've got to show something. It's not going to be a military victory, but they've got to answer at some point. Don't get me wrong, I don't think these are not representatives of their people. They didn't take a vote, but they're embedded in that society, and they will have to answer for something, and that gives me some hope that there'll be more hostage trading going on.
Yocha, both as president of the think tank, but mainly as an officer in Israeli elite unit, how do you see this war continuing from this very moment in time and developing?
Well, we just asked Israeli society, and we're conducting many polls to sort of gauge the public atmosphere around various aspects to do with the war. And we asked Israelis about the two war goals. So there's about 93% and 94% respectively support for the twin war goals of bringing back all hostages and dismantling Hamas. So now, we know Israeli society, we're divided about everything. To see 94% of Israelis agree about one thing, now about two things that are challenging, and to some extent you can say controversial, but they're not controversial within Israeli society. So bringing back the hostages, I would love to say that, our courageous combatants and officers are going to do it, but and if there will be an opportunity, intel-wise and so on, and operationally, they'll go about it. But it's probably not going to come about as a result of special ops and military operations. It will be as a result of pressure and pressure and pressure, and as a result of a Hamas decision that as a result of this pressure, it's their best option. Now, in terms of military pressure, this pause is not going to turn into a ceasefire, at least as much as it depends on Israeli decision makers and decision making, because a precondition for any kind of good future for Israelis, restoration of deterrence, stability, and a good future for Palestinians and a good future for the region, is removing Hamas as the leadership of that territory. I wouldn't say to kill every Hamasnik possible, but Hamas can no longer control this territory, and it might take a very long time. They've been preparing for that moment. It's a very, very difficult task, but I must say, and I think I share it with many others, I'm astonished by the achievements of the IDF in such a difficult, densely populated area with so many mines and underground tunnels and so on. The ability of the IDF to conduct this operation is extremely impressive, and our forces are committed. And again, it will take time, but I think it's achievable.
Can I just pick up on one thing that Yohanan said? So I joined the New York Times. I started my career in Beirut in 1979 in the Civil War, and then I would join the New York Times in 1981. And one of the first things they did was send me to cover the aftermath of the Sadat assassination in '81. And I learned one of the most important lessons of journalism covering that event, because I got to Cairo and I thought, wow, everyone's going to be sad and upset and renting their garments, and no, not a lot of Egyptians were mourning for Anwar Sadat. We were mourning, Israelis were mourning, but they had a different view of him and his regime. And I learned one of maybe the most important lessons, I say, of journalism. Sometimes the news is in the noise, and sometimes the news is in the silence. It's in what isn't being said. And one of the most important skills you can develop as a journalist is how to listen to the silence. There's a deafening silence going on right now. And I want to point to Yohanan's polls. Israeli Arabs overwhelmingly condemned what Hamas did. Hamas thought they were going to trigger a revolution there. Lots of tension in the West Bank, but no uprising. Lots of statements from Arab leaders, but they're all quietly rooting for Israel to finish Hamas off.
And the only airline flying to Israel except for El Al is the airline from the Emirates.
So I think those are huge disappointments, for Hamas and miscalculations. But the thing and I'm quoting, I didn't tell you this poll of yours in my column tomorrow night. Yohanan, a very interesting poll about Israeli attitudes toward the nation-state law, which was as IDI called it, a jingoistic and divisive law that really alienated Israeli Arabs and Druze. And the poll showed more Israeli, 56 to 40, a surge of Israeli sort of sensitivity to Arab voters.
56%, I think, versus 40 or less than 40.
But it was a shift.
Support changing the nation-state bill in a way to add the principle of equality across the board. Yeah.
And what was interesting, I was talking to Shibli Talhami, who's a pollster on the Middle East at University of Maryland, and he was actually one who pointed out to me, and he had three explanations. One is that Israeli Arabs did condemn what Hamas did, and Israelis noticed that. They didn't, rise up, and Israelis noticed that. And most of all, people don't know, but I've put this in several columns, that 50% of the graduating doctors of Israel's medical schools last year were Israeli Arabs. 50% of Israel's pharmacists and 24% of its nurses. So about 40% of Israel's medical workers are Israeli Arabs. Now, when war comes, that number goes way up because a lot of Israeli doctors get drafted and whatnot. So many of the Israeli wounded are being treated by Israeli Arabs, doctors and nurses. And that's also feeding into that poll. So again, if you're looking for any ray of sunshine, I think that poll, Yohanan, was very telling. Thank you for that.
Tom, you are, to me, and I believe to most people, one of the very few and maybe the only journalist who doesn't just cover the news or comment on the news, but actually makes the news. You did it with the Saudi peace plan at the time. You did it now with President Biden. So I will ask you to do it for us by drawing to us a picture of what the region, Israel, will look like once this is over. What can we expect? How do you see the day after?
Oh, wow. My crystal ball is really foggy. Honestly, Danny, I don't know. I do believe that the tide of history is with integration, pluralism, and coexistence. And why is that? Again, the biggest thing that's happened in the Arab world that I've covered over now since 1979 is that when I came to Beirut in 79, covered the Civil War, and then back for the New York Times in 81 and covered the invasion. The way Arab leaders built their legitimacy was through resistance. Resistance to the Jews, resistance to Americans, resistance to the West, in some case resistance to Shiites, to Persians, but you built your legitimacy by resilience. The biggest thing that's happened in the Arab world over the last 15 years is the emergence of a whole new generation of Arab leaders, MBZ in the UAE, Prince Salman in Bahrain, MBS in Saudi Arabia, who are building their legitimacy by delivering resilience, not resistance. They're saying they're striking a new bargain with their people, and it's follow me if I give you educational resilience, skills resilience, employment resilience, and yes, even environmental resilience. I'm leaving for the Global Climate Conference in Abu Dhabi in a couple days. This is a whole new generation. And if you think it's not having an effect, you aren't paying attention, because MBS is responsible for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And he's responsible for unleashing the biggest social revolution on the planet right now, basically, in terms of what's going on inside Saudi Arabia. If you haven't been to Saudi Arabia in the last 3 years, you haven't been to Saudi Arabia. And I've been going there for a long time. So it's quite remarkable, but you see the effects. In 2019, MBS in Saudi Arabia announced that Saudi women could attend sporting events. We don't think that's like a big deal, but that was a big deal in Saudi Arabia. Well, guess what happened? Iranian women, one went out and burned herself, set herself aflame, unless they could be allowed to go to sporting events. So you see how this struggle inside the region between the resistance leaders and the resilience leaders is now really playing out. My money is on the resilience leaders because they're betting on human nature. But it's going to be a struggle.
Yocha, how do you see the day after?
Well, Tom spoke about the region, so I'll use the final words to speak about Israel. I think that the fact that Israelis came together in such a in such a heart-moving way and in such an impressive manner is not going to vanish the day after. We were at the deep division was also an emotional division. Some said we were close to a civil war, and that emotional division has vanished, and there will be far fewer recipients or clients for politics of division, and that creates an opportunity to come together on some of the big challenges of Israeli society. We mentioned some of them. Tom mentioned some in terms of integration of Israeli Arabs and the change of trajectory with the Haredi society, changing our public sector that is in grave need of reform and change. and of course at the constitutional and electoral reform levels. So there's an entire list, and I think there will be an opportunity here to put the Israeli society on a different trajectory, and hopefully if that happens, then this terrible moment of tragedy will also be turned into a moment of hope and opportunity.
And if I could add to that, Yohanan, I've often said that I follow Israeli politics closely because Israeli politics is to wider trends in civilization what off-Broadway is to Broadway. Things start in Israel, whether it's a wall, heard about that in America, or airline hijacking or other things, and then they come to Broadway. And in the back of my mind, as I listen to Yohanan say that this fed-upness with division, because Israel wasn't divided, it was being divided. Pay attention to that difference. It was deliberately being divided. And America is not divided. It's being divided. And I hope Israel will give us an example of how a society can overcome being divided by parties and politicians.
Thank you. I mean, I have the feeling that we could spend the rest of the night here listening to these very wise words and really learning every minute. But unfortunately, our time is up. And I want to, first of all, thank you, Tom, for agreeing to be here and in accepting our invitation. We know you don't do this very often, never. And you made this, or never. You've really, I mean, I want you to know that we don't take this for granted. We appreciate it very, very much, and thank you very much for doing it. And thank you also for caring so much about Israel. Your articles, your words, demonstrate a true friendship, and we appreciate it very, very much, as we do the friendship of the United States and especially of the President, which we're very grateful for.
But I have a great tutor in that guy, and if you're not tuned in on IDI, get tuned in, right. And open your checkbook too. They really need it now more than ever. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Yocha, thank you also for coming all the way for Israel for this. As I said before, this is no easy time to leave Israel, and we appreciate very much your honoring us by agreeing to be honored by us. And thank you for all you do, and thank you for being here with us, and thank you both for enriching us with your words, with your wisdom, and I wish everybody hopefully better days, better news, and be well, keep safe, and thank you. God bless America, God bless Israel, and God bless the America-Israel Friendship League. Thank you.
Now that was a real treat for the end of the year, even during these difficult and challenging moments. Truly inspiring to see and hear from people who really are committed to helping strengthen Israel and strengthen the ties between Israel and the United States. We're glad that you could join us to see some of the highlights from this incredible gathering. For those of you that have been with us before in this program, we've really highlighted some incredible people who are doing things that really make us all proud and inspire us. As part of this gathering this year in recognition of friendship and solidarity, we put together an incredible resource of 75 unsung heroes and their stories, which we've told over the course of this year in our weekly webinar series. We've actually summarized and reduced that to something that you can flip through and have for free as our sort of end of the year present. We'd love for you to see it. All you have to do is request it for us, send us an email, at webinar@aifl.org. We're happy to send you a copy. Put something in the chat, send us an email, let us know if you're looking for the material, and it's something you can not only enjoy yourself, you could share it with others. Perhaps you saw and met a number of these people during our webinar series. Here's an opportunity to see what that looked like over the course of a year. So that's going to be a wrap for us for 2023, and we'll be looking forward to a 2024 filled with brighter lights and brighter headlines for you. Hopefully that's what's in our thoughts and prayers, certainly as we end 2023. We will be updating you with the exact programming schedule. We'll be off for a little bit with the holidays approaching, and recognize that without you, we could not make this series as successful as it has been over these last several years. So thank you for all your support. Thank you to the entire AIFL team. Particular shout out to my colleague Giovanni and to Danielle in Israel and their teams, both in the United States and Israel, who have done so much to make this such a successful series and to lift our spirits even during hard times. So we'll look forward to seeing you all in January. Happy Sylvester, as they say in Israel, for those celebrating the secular New Year. We look forward to seeing you in 2024.